Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks for being here. Today's segment, this segment, I want to talk about how easily the media can manipulate people. Not you, of course, because you're here. In the next few minutes, I'm going to explain in great detail one of the tricks that they use all the time. And I'm going to show you how they tried to use this against Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis is, of course, the governor of Florida. The left hates Ron DeSantis because he's the front runner to be the Republican candidate for president in 2024. So the media has made it their mission to destroy Ron DeSantis at all costs. He will be the most racist, evil, horrible, corrupt person of all time, even worse than Donald Trump. That's what you're going to hear for the next 4 years. Get ready. Death DeSantis was literally trending on Twitter yesterday morning. Death DeSantis. So 60 Minutes, the legitimate news organization, 60 Minutes, gave it a shot on Sunday, gave their best attempt to take Ron DeSantis down, and they failed miserably. So I want to talk about a trick that everyone on TV news uses, at least the lamestream. Once you know this trick, you'll see it everywhere. And you'll be a better consumer of fake news. You'll spot it. You'll spot it from a mile away. You'll see their deceit, and no one else will. Everyone else will get tricked. You'll see the true story. So here's the deal. 60 Minutes, Sunday. Their accusation against Ron DeSantis is that he accepted $100,000 from Publix. Publix is a grocery store. A billion of them in Florida. He accepted $100,000 to his upcoming campaign. In return, he rewarded Publix with the exclusive rights, that's important, the exclusive rights to distribute the vaccine across the state. It's a play-to-play, pay-to-play accusation. Make sense? So, 60 Minutes did an entire story on this claim. I want to play this 1-minute clip just to start it off here. Now, let's just watch this as a casual person. You're a regular person. You just happen to turn on 60 Minutes. You're like an average, middle of the road, sort of political person, and you don't know the tricks. All right, so just watch this casually and see what you think about it. Here it is.
We wanted to ask Governor DeSantis about the deal, but he declined our request for an interview. We caught up with him south of Orlando.
Publix, as you know, donated $100,000 to your campaign, and then you rewarded them with the exclusive rights to distribute the vaccination in Palm Beach.
So first of all, what you're saying is wrong.
How is that not pay to play?
That's a fake narrative. I met with the county mayor, I met with the administrator, I met with all the folks at Palm Beach County, and I said, here's some of the options. We can do more drive-through sites. We can give more to hospitals. We can do the Publix. And they said, we think that would be the easiest thing for our residents.
But Melissa McKinley, the county commissioner in the Glades, told us the governor never met with her about the Publix deal.
The criticism is that it's pay to play,
and
Governor.
It's wrong. It's a fake narrative. I just disabused you of the narrative, and you don't care about the facts because obviously I laid it out for you in a way that is irrefutable.
Well,
and so it's clearly not.
Isn't there the nearest Publix?
No, you're wrong. You're wrong. Yes,
That's
sir.
actually a fact.
Okay. Did you catch the edits? Did you catch all the edits there? Here's the key you need to know. When you watch TV interviews or something like that, whenever they cut away, whenever the camera angle changes, whenever the camera shot changes, they're usually, or possibly, if not usually, editing something out, right? So let's say you have someone being interviewed and the interviewer, right? So the interviewer asks a question, then the camera goes over to the person answering the question. And they answer, and they answer, and they answer. And then randomly, the camera cuts back to the person asking the questions. And they're like nodding away, like, yes. And then they cut back to the person answering. Why do they do that? There's an edit there. If they kept the camera on the person talking the whole time, then you would have seen like a jump cut because they would have been talking like this, and then all of a sudden they're like over here. So they have to move the camera angle away, they make the edit, and then they bring it back. Almost every time the camera changes, there's an edit. Now, there's 3 in just that 60-second piece right there. All right, let's go over 2 of them, and then I want to play the whole thing, and then I'll give you the most shady of them all right? So watch this one here, see if you notice the edit.
Here's some of the options. We can do more drive-through sites. We can give more to hospitals. We can do the Publix. And they said, we think that would be the easiest thing for our residents.
But Melissa McKinley, the county commissioner in the Glades, told us the governor never met with her about the Publix deal.
The criticism is that it's pay to play,
And it's
Governor.
wrong, it's wrong, it's a fake narrative. I just disabused you of the narrative, and you don't care about the facts.
We can stop it there. Okay, so that was the easy one. All right, so he was talking, and then they kind of muted his microphone, and then she interjected over it, and then they cut back later to the end of what he said. That's an easy one to notice, right? This one's more difficult to pick up on. Check this out.
Publix, as you know, donated $100,000 to your campaign, and then you rewarded them with the exclusive rights to distribute the vaccination in Palm Beach.
So first of all, what you're saying is wrong.
How is that not pay to play?
That's a fake narrative.
Did you see it? Did you see it when they panned backwards? Right, so there's 3 different camera angles in that shot. You have the camera on the governor, you have the camera on the reporter, and then you have the camera, the wide shot that has the reporter and the governor far away. Okay, 60 Minutes flips between the 3 camera angles in order to make their audio edits. So he starts off on him, they pan back, and then they pan back on him again. We're gonna play that one more time. Notice the pan back and the pan forward, but also you can see his hand. Watch Ron DeSantis' hand. I forget which it is. It either starts up here and then immediately it's down on the desk, or it's on the desk and it's, I forget, but watch his hand and see, you can see the edit they make.
Publix, as you know, donated $100,000 to your campaign, and then you rewarded them with the exclusive rights to distribute the vaccination in Palm Beach.
So first of all, what you're saying is wrong.
How is that not pay to play?
That's a fake narrative.
Oh, darn it, there's like one more second there, and you can see that his hand comes back on the table there in the next second. That's a cut. They cut out a ton of important information, okay? What did they cut out of that sentence right there? That cut that they made, what did they edit out? They edited out, first of all, when we did, the first pharmacies that had it were CVS and Walgreens. That refutes the entire play-to-play narrative. The audio that they edited out, right? So the whole narrative is, you gave exclusive rights to Publix because they gave you a bunch of money. And in his response, he said, no, that's not true. Then he said, the first pharmacies that had it were CVS and Walgreens, not Publix. But they took that part out, and then they cut back into him afterwards. But they took out the entire point was refuted right there. The entire point of their entire piece was refuted right there. And no one would know that. And most people were tricked because they don't know that when the camera shifts, there's probably an audio edit. All right, now right here, I want to play the whole video, the real video. What Ron DeSantis actually said. This is why they had to make so many jump cuts throughout the entire thing and edit out the truth. Here's the full clip.
So first of all, what you're saying is wrong. That's a fake narrative. So first of all, when we did the first pharmacies that had it were CVS and Walgreens, and they had a long-term care mission. So they were going to the long-term care facilities. They got vaccine in the middle of December. They started going to the long-term care facilities the 3rd week of December to do LTCs. So that was their mission. That was very important, and we trusted them to do that. As we got into January, we wanted to expand the distribution points. So yes, you had the counties, you had some drive-through sites, you had hospitals that were doing a lot, but we wanted to get it into communities more. So we reached out to other retail pharmacies, Publix, Walmart. Obviously, CVS and Walgreens had to finish that mission, and we said we're gonna use you as soon as you're done with that. For the Publix, they were the first one to raise their hand, say they were ready to go. And you know what? We did it on a trial basis. I had 3 counties. I actually showed up that weekend and talked to seniors across 4 different Publix. How was the experience? Is this good? Should you think this is the way to go? And it was 100% positive, so we expanded it, and then folks liked it. And I can tell you, if you look at a place like Palm Beach County, they were kind of struggling at first in terms of the senior numbers. I met with the county mayor, I met with the administrator, I met with all the folks at Palm Beach County, and I said, here's some of the options. We can do more drive-through sites. We can give more to hospitals. We can do the Publix. We can do this. They calculated that 90% of their seniors live within 1.5 miles of a Publix. And they said, we think that would be the easiest thing for our residents. So we did that. And what ended up happening was you had 65 Publix in Palm Beach. Palm Beach is one of the biggest counties, one of the most elderly counties. We've done almost 75% of the seniors in Palm Beach. And the reason is because you had the strong retail footprint. So our way has been multifaceted. It has worked. And we're also now very much expanding CVS and Walgreens now that they've completed the long-term care mission. Yes? And it's wrong. It's wrong. It's a fake narrative. I just disabused you of the narrative, and you don't care about the facts because obviously I laid it out for you in a way that is irrefutable. And so it's clearly not. No, you're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. Yes, sir.
Okay, so they edited out all the explanation to what actually happened. All right, I got one more stealth audio edit here. Again, when the camera cuts, when the camera changes angles, there's an audio cut there. All right, see if you can spot this one.
I met with the county mayor, I met with the administrator, I met with all the folks at Palm Beach County, and I said, here's some of the options. We can do more drive-through sites. We can give more to hospitals. We can do the Publix. And they said, we think that would be the easiest thing for our residents.
But Melissa McKinley, the county commissioner in the Glades, told us the
stop
governor never...
See that? So he was talking, they cut to the reporter going, yes. And then they slice the audio, cut it right there, and it cuts over back to him. And that edit took out, a minute of explanation that, again, refutes the entire point of the article. Does that make sense? Now, a couple other points here. Here's what happens next. Right? The next thing they do, there's one, here's the sentence. The sentence they took out right there, the sentence they took out is, they calculated that 90% of their seniors live within 1.5 miles of Publix. That's why they put it in Publix. And they took that sentence out because that would have made them look, it would have refuted the whole point if you needed to do the story. So they took all this out. This is what they do nonstop all the time. This is an intentional hack job, an absolute intentional hack job because they knew the truth. We got a graph here of trust in the media over time. And you can see Republicans tout, like 10% of people trust the media. I don't even know who that 10% is. And it's things like this. And then here's what happens. This story, it gets laundered through all these other media outlets, and then the narrative is established. So Axios had a headline right after the 60 Minutes piece. Florida governor clashes with 60 Minutes over COVID vaccine rollout. And you're like, what? And to see how it is, that's a pounce headline. So whenever a Democrat does something wrong, the story is, whenever a Republican does something wrong, the story is about how the Republican did something wrong. Whenever a Democrat does something wrong, the headline's always about how Republicans pounce on the Democrat. So it's still always the Republicans' fault. And this is the same thing here. Ron DeSantis clashes with 60 Minutes lied. They straight up made up a story and selectively edited all the important relevant information out to back up their claim. That is a 100% manufactured crisis. Not to mention, of course, DC and New York and a bunch of other states have vaccines in grocery stores too. So even the premise doesn't even. So it's going to be laundered through all these other media outlets. The narrative's made. And then the worst thing is nobody pays any price for this. Right? Maybe 60 Minutes will apologize. Maybe. Probably not. The reporter will still be employed. On to her next victim. Narrative continued, mission accomplished. In this case, we had the raw video of his press conference, so we could see line by line of what they took out, what they cut, and what they skipped around with, so we could see the truth. Also, he's had a bunch of Democrats come out and support him. This is the mayor of Palm Beach. The mayor of Palm Beach said, I watched the 60 Minutes segment on Palm Beach County last night, feel compelled to issue this statement. The reporting was not just based on bad information, it was intentionally false. I know this because I offered to provide my insight into Palm Beach County's vaccination efforts, and 60 Minutes declined. They know that the governor came to Palm Beach County, met with me and the county administrator, and we asked to expand the state's partnership with Publix. We also discussed our local plans to expand mass vaccination centers throughout the county, which the governor's been incredibly supportive. We asked, he delivered. They had that information, and they left it out because it kneecapped their narrative. We've confronted this pandemic for over a year. Our residents, like all Americans, are tired, and the media is making it worse. They're hell-bent on dividing us for cheap views and clicks. 60 Minutes should be ashamed. That is a Democrat. Jared Moskowitz, he's the head of the Florida Division of Emergency Management. He's a Democrat as well. He campaigned for Gore and Obama. He said, 60 Minutes, I said this before, I'll say it again. Publix was recommended by the emergency management system and the health department as other pharmacies were not ready to start. Period, full stop. No one from the governor's office suggested Publix. It's absolute malarkey. So now you know, watch out for jump cuts on TV shows. And generally, you can't trust the media. You can't trust a thing they say. But there's people who still do. People still think CNN is news. People think CBS is news, that 60 Minutes is news. And those people will still be tricked. They'll still be infected. They don't know the true story. Which is why it's so important that you actively spread the word. Spread the truth. Otherwise, who else will? The news? True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, I got a bunch of, just call this a hodgepodge segment, just a bunch of truth bombs that we're gonna drop on you right here. Camera cut over here, deceptive editing. It's a live show, you can't do that here. First, Major League Baseball, you know they moved their All-Star game from Georgia, of course, because of Georgia's voter ID law that doesn't even require a voter ID. Please go back to yesterday's show, opening segment. You can download the app for free, the first app on your smartphone, and we go over the exact text of the bill. Everyone's freaking out because it requires a voter ID, which is insane that people would even freak out about that. But the bill doesn't even require a voter ID. Please go back and watch that story and spread that. It is insane. All you need is a water bill. And even then, you can vote provisionally even if you don't have that. Anyway, that was yesterday. Major League Baseball decided to move the All-Star game to Colorado, to Denver, which has an even stricter voter ID law than Georgia does. Right? And also in Colorado, they only give you 15 days, or only give you 15 days of early voting. Georgia has 19. And as you saw in that headline there, Atlanta is 51% black and Denver is 10% black, but yay, social justice. And they pat themselves. Are you going to get it or no? Should I skip past it? Again, live TV here. Do you think we'll find it or should I skip it? Bummer. All right, I will just tell you what this next soundbite is here. This leads to one of my favorite Ami Horowitz videos. So he goes, remember the whole claim is that black people are too stupid to get an ID. They can't figure it out. They don't know, how to get one, and therefore that requirement is racist against black people, right? So Ami Horowitz went to some college campus, might have been Columbia, I forget. And he went around and he asked all these white people about voter ID laws and if they're racist. And they're all like, yeah, of course, super racist, like unbelievably racist. One of my favorite is these types of people. These types of people don't live in areas with easy access to the DMV. Or black people don't have access to the internet, right? This is like 2 years ago we made this video. And these white people saying black people don't have access to the internet? Someone literally said they don't have the knowledge of how it works in most of these communities because they're not aware or informed. Listen to yourselves. That's an actual quote. They don't have knowledge of how it works because they're not aware or informed. So the white people say voter ID laws are very racist, and we can't require that. So Ami did a couple of those interviews, and then he went to East Harlem to talk to some of these mysterious, poor, unfortunate, ill-informed black people. What they have to say. Here it is.
Do you have ID normally? You carry ID around?
Yes, I have state ID.
Do you carry ID?
Yes, I do.
Do you know any black person who doesn't carry ID?
No. Everyone that I know has an ID.
Why would they think we don't have ID?
That's a lie. Why would they say that?
Do you have ID?
Yes.
Because I have my ID and my friends have their ID, so like we know what we need to carry around.
Everybody that I know have ID. Like, that's one of the things you need to walk around with New York with, ID.
Those are legit IDs. I heard a lot also that black people can't figure out how to get to the DMV.
Really?
What does that say to you?
I know it's at on 25th Street.
Do you know where the DMV is around you?
It's on 125th Street and 3rd Avenue, I believe.
You know how to get there?
Yeah.
Would you have a problem getting there if you had to get there?
No.
That's my favorite line. Where's the DMV? Like 125th Street. They're literally in the first clip. The white people are saying they just don't know where the DMV is, and the guy's like, oh, it's on 125th Street. I love that. Do you see how racist that is from the woke progressives? Could you imagine if Donald Trump? Could you imagine if Ron DeSantis? Could you imagine if any Republican said, black people can't figure out how to work the internet? Black people don't know where the DMV is. They're too poor, too stupid to figure that out. Could you imagine? But when a Democrat says it, it's noble and enlightened and supposedly helping black people. Isn't that incredible? Let me play this here or show you guys this. This is, and again, in Georgia, you don't even need an ID. That's one of the biggest lies. It's got to be the biggest lie of the whole thing in Georgia. You don't even need an ID with this new law. Which could take me in a whole thing about, like, Republicans in Georgia, what are you even doing? This law is nothing. But anyway, meanwhile, in Mexico, one of the most secure ID documents in Latin America, the new voting ID card used in Mexico, includes multiple security features and state-of-the-art verification methods that have so far foiled every counterfeiting attempt. Mexico's Consul General in El Paso, Texas, said in 2016 the effort had one thing in mind: to perfect and keep perfecting our democracy. So in Mexico, not only do they have voter ID laws, but they have a voter ID that is like a super high-tech, space-aged, like impossible to counterfeit ID itself. And in America, the left says that voter ID destroys democracy. It restricts democracy. This law is going to be the end of democracy. In Mexico, strong voter ID laws and a strong voter ID, literal ID, is to perfect democracy. I say election law or election day needs to look like it does in France. See, it pains me to say that it needs to look like France. It's one day, you vote in person, you get it done, count them right then and there. And our voter ID laws need to be that of Mexico. Do you know how difficult that is to say? Apparently these cards, these ID cards, have 14 different security features on them, down to the exact type of paper that's used. Super, super crazy high resolution. It's got a chip in it. It's got 3 different QR codes. Let me read this. The QR codes, 2 of which contain biographical and biometric information relating to the card carrier, including facial data. Even the color photo of the voter contains visible information embedded within the picture. It's like crazy high tech. And that's fine, no one has a problem with that. But in Georgia, the laws, can we at least have a water bill or something? Can you give us something to prove that you're who you say you are? Oh, it's the end of democracy. All right, one last story here. George Floyd trial. So all the articles I've read about the George Floyd trial, and again, if you've learned nothing, you can't trust anything the media says, because everything's through their filter, and they're not going to tell you the truth, and they're not going to tell you the whole story. Right? I want to play this one moment from the trial, though, because you're not going to get it anywhere else. I'd play the whole clip here, but it's super boring, and trials are not like TV shows, right? So I want to play one clip at the end of the segment, though. But Derek Chauvin's lawyer asks the police chief, and the police chief is, I don't want to say, like the police chief earlier said that this is not protocol, what Derek Chauvin did, right? So the police chief is not in support of Derek Chauvin and helping the police officer, right? So Derek Chauvin's lawyer goes up and says, hey, are you familiar with camera perspective bias? And the police chief says, no, I'm not. And what the lawyer does is he plays 2 videos side by side. One video is the video that we've all seen, where Derek Chauvin's knee is on George Floyd's neck. We've all seen that video before. The other video, timed up in sync at the exact same second, the other video is from Officer King's body cam. Officer King was the officer who was kneeling on the middle of George Floyd's body. Right? There were 3 officers in George Floyd. Officer King was in the middle. So you see Officer King's perspective. And from that perspective, Derek Chauvin's knee is not on George Floyd's neck. It's on George Floyd's shoulder blade. Here's the clip.
Would you agree that from the perspective of Officer King's body camera, it appears that Officer Chauvin's knee was more on Mr. Floyd's shoulder blade?
Yes.
I have no further questions.
Ooh, yeah, I have no further questions. That's as much of a mic drop as you get in real life in a courtroom. And that's not helpful to the narrative. Add that to the medical report that says there was no injury to George Floyd's neck. Now, it's only about 30 seconds of video, and it was about 9 minutes, right? Derek Chauvin was on top of George Floyd for 9 minutes, and they only showed about 30 seconds that from King's camera that you could see what was going on. But is that enough? Is even that 30 seconds enough to cast just enough doubt in the jury that it wasn't Derek Chauvin who killed George Floyd? Maybe Derek Chauvin's knee was never even on George Floyd's neck, even though from one camera perspective it looked like it was. Final story, and then we got some guests coming up. Do you remember the story just a couple days ago of the guy who drove through the barricade at the Capitol building, killed the Capitol police officer? Remember that story? Went away real fast. Turns out the guy who did it was a follower of Louis Farrakhan and Nation of Islam. So that's the end of that one. Can't trust anything you hear on the news. It's hard to find the true story, which is why I'm glad you're here. Coming up next, we're going to talk to a DA in California who George Soros is funding a candidate against. We have to stop these rogue DAs from taking power. Talk about that next. Talk with him next. True story, Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. We've been on a bit of a crusade here against rogue DAs, rogue district attorneys, and I want to encourage all of us to pay way more attention to district attorney races in your neighborhood. So here's the quick backstory. George Soros, for years and years, has been spending tons of money to try to win congressional races. But he realized we spend millions and millions of dollars, you win a congressional race, he's there for 2 years, and he's just one of 435 votes, and what can they really do anyway, especially when it comes to criminal justice reform, the progressive version of criminal justice reform. So George Soros realized smartly, let's spend all that money instead on DA races. No one pays attention to DA races. Like every race is like $100,000. I'll drop in a couple million, my candidate will win. And then when the DA gets in there, they can implement whatever they want because the DAs have a ton of discretion on what crimes to prosecute and which not to. This has real life implications on the ground because he's been very successful at this with DAs across the country. We've played this video before. This is a man walking down the street and he just decided to kick this 65-year-old Asian woman right in the chest, knock her over, stomped on her head 3 times. It turns out that that guy, who was caught the next day, he murdered his mother when he was 19 years old. He served only 17 years in prison, got out, and did that. We need strong DAs who follow the rule of law, not these woke DAs who let people out in the name of justice. Todd Spitzer is the current district attorney in Orange County, California. It's Southern California. You got San Diego on the furthest southern along the border, and then just north of us is Orange County. It's generally a conservative county, although it's been kind of back and forth these last few years. And he has a George Soros-funded opponent coming up in the next election. Mr. Spitzer, how are you, sir?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Mike. Good morning.
Really good to talk to you. I want to encourage everyone to support you, even if they're not in Orange County.
Thank you. We need that for sure.
Can you help us understand the amount of discretion that a DA has and how that's a genuine thing and it's a good thing, prosecutorial discretion, but how it's being abused?
First of all, you're right. Thank you. Watching that video gives me shivers, and hearing you do the intro really also makes me, quite frankly, nervous and scared. We're literally fighting for our streets today, the safety of our communities. I just filed a hate crime yesterday against a man who attacked a Korean American woman in the city of Fullerton here in California, and he threw a rock through a windshield and said that Koreans are attacking. I just had 4 people killed in cold blood last week in the city of Orange, and so we're dealing with that mass murder. I mean, our streets are already at risk, and then you want to take a Los Angeles, a San Francisco, a Philadelphia, and you want to risk that in all of our other cities around America. This is a national conversation. Thank you for leading it.
How do DAs decide what cases to prosecute and which not to? Because you only have so many lawyers, so much time, so much money, so you can't do everything. So how do you decide what to prosecute and what not to?
If a police make an arrest, then that's probable cause standard, and we believe we can prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, we file it. We file cases because we want to keep our community safe. Now, what happens in the disposition on low-level types of crimes, we want to help people, right? We want to take first-time offenders and we want to put them into programs. We want diversion. We want rehabilitation. We are a really compassionate, empathetic office. But when you take a guy that was convicted for murdering his mom, like you saw in the video, or I have people who commit, these egregious, serious, and violent crimes, you better believe we're going to ask for the max. And I'll tell you, this hate crime, people need to know in Orange County, California, if you commit hate here, we're going to file hate crimes and you could look to up to 6 years in state prison. We're not messing around with the serious and violent offenders. And what you saw in Los Angeles with George Gascon, and you see with my opponent, this guy they recruited, he looks good on paper. He makes a good image, but he's as dangerous as they come. He's a criminal lawyer, just like Chesa Bowden was a public defender in San Francisco. They elected him to be the DA. I can tell you, Mike, we don't need 2 public defenders in Orange County.
It's such a good point. So we had Desiree Andrade on the TV show the other day and on my radio show yesterday. Real quick story. Her 20-year-old son was murdered by, I think, 5 guys. They were facing life in prison without parole. Gascon in LA came to power, lowered it down to 20 years. They murdered him. Cold blood, thought about it, pre-planned it, brutal. And her point was, this Gascon guy, the LA DA, he's a defense attorney, but he's taken over the role of the prosecutor. And same thing with, as you mentioned in San Francisco, we have 2 defenses on both sides, and no one's looking out for the victims of these crimes.
Right. So I'm wearing my justice pin. I was the statewide campaign manager in California for Marsy's Law, which is the Victims' Bill of Rights. We amended the California Constitution. I've been a victim's attorney. I've always fought for victims. Let me tell you what you said, and I'm going to remind you of your own words. You said how smart they are, about how smart the Gascon people are, how smart the Soros people are. They recruit people who seem to fit that community. George Gascon was a very high-ranking police officer in the LAPD, and then he went to be the DA of San Francisco and ruined that city. The mayor endorsed against him, and yet he got elected. And then, listen, this is really important, Mike. These guys make all kinds of promises and they talk around the edges. They don't commit to much. Well, when I get in office, I'll look at this. I'll consider this. And then they destroy the place because they actually had an agenda and their donors required that agenda in order to finance them. So they're running kind of like above, maybe I'll enforce enhancements. Let me make something clear, Mike. Hate crime is an enhancement crime. It's not a crime in and of itself. When George Gascon said, I'm not going to file enhancements, he stupidly did not understand he could not file hate crimes until he got called on it. And then he said, well, I'll make an exception for hate crimes.
Tell me explain these enhancements and why these woke DAs, George Soros DAs, don't like them.
So George Gascon has said, and my opponent has said, keeping people in prison too long really has no effect at all. It doesn't really contribute to their rehabilitation. Well, there's another side of the equation. which is not about rehabilitation. It's keeping these people away from us so we can be safe in society. You know, there's that part of the equation they don't want to talk about. They talk about how the victims are the victims of the family members who are related to the people that went to prison. And there's groups now calling themselves crime victims because they're victims of the event that was committed by their family member. They're not the actual target of the perpetrator. And so they're turning everything upside down because they have an agenda, which is defund the police, get rid of the police, get rid of prisons, get rid of jails. We mass incarcerate. We have a carceral system. There's all these buzzwords that are circulating throughout society now. They're getting exploded on social media. And the fact of the matter is they're dangerous. If people really understood the thoughtful, methodical way we are holding people accountable in Orange County with compassion and empathy for the low-level offenders, but we're taking charge and we're making sure these people are held accountable and society is safe. Let me tell you what all these elections are about in the final analysis. It really comes down to this, Mike. Do people feel safe? Home sales are exploding in my county from people leaving Los Angeles County. There's been the largest exodus of individuals leaving San Francisco in the last 60 years of San Francisco. Usually there was an 8% exodus. It's now up to 65% because people are not going to live in these cities anymore.
No, yep. Todd Spitzer, Orange County DA, Orange County, California. Todd, what's your website? People can support you.
ToddSpitzer.com, very easy. And let me tell you what's at risk from a national perspective. It's not just about Orange County. If a guy like me, who's empathetic but strong against criminals, gets wiped out, they did it in LA, they did it in San Francisco, they did it in Philadelphia, Chicago, St. Louis, the rest of the nation is at risk. This is a national campaign, but I think, and Mike, I think I'm the right guy to explain this as a national conversation, and I'm very excited that I get the opportunity to do it.
I'm grateful you're here, Todd. Let's. I got a local radio show in San Diego, so let's talk again locally.
Anytime.
I'm grateful
Absolutely.
that you're spokesperson nationwide. ToddSpitzer.com. Thanks, Todd. Please pay attention to your local DA races because the left is, George Soros is. I guarantee you the next DA election in your city will have a record amount of money in it because of the George Soros-funded person. And I've never been like, oh, evil George Soros. I've never been that guy, except for this story here about these DAs, because it's a proven fact. There's no doubt about it. Thomas Sowell always talked about how the left views criminals as victims. They view the criminals as the victims. What an amazing spin Mr. Spitzer just talked about, that these activist groups view their families as crime victims, as opposed to the actual victims of their crime. Like that woman who was just walking down the street and got stomped in the head 3 times. All right, coming up next, we'll give you the true story of the infrastructure bill and how 5% of it has to do with infrastructure. Talk about that next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, just like the Georgia Voter ID law doesn't actually require an ID, here is Biden's infrastructure bill that has almost no infrastructure in it. Here's Steve Ducey talking to Saki.
Only 5% of the spending in this package goes towards roads and bridges, and I'm curious why that number is so low in something that is being sold as an infrastructure package.
We're actually selling it as a once-in-a-century or once-in-a-generation investment in partly our infrastructure, but partly industries of the future.
Oh, that's how we're selling it. That was Peter Ducey, apologies. Joel Griffith is here from Heritage Foundation. Joel, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me today.
Hey, man. Hey, it's just an investment in industries in the future, Joel. So if it's not on infrastructure, describe the takeover of our economy. What is this bill if not infrastructure?
No, the numbers are astounding. More than 9 in every $10 in this bill go to things other than roads, bridges, seaports, and airports. For instance, $174 billion goes to electric vehicle industry. That number dwarfs by tens of billions of dollars the total amount spent on roads, bridges, seaports, and airports. And that's just one component of this. There's a $52 billion line item that goes to monitoring domestic industrial production and those industries. $52 billion just to monitor it. And this looks like something out of a grand Soviet 5-year plan, far more than anything that we expect out of United States Congress.
Yeah, what does that mean? What is that? Monitor what?
Monitoring domestic industrial production, $52 billion to monitor it. There's a big push in this, about $300 billion that is actually focused on manufacturing. Now, of course, we all want the United States to manufacture. And over the last few years, we've actually seen all-time record highs in industrial output. But to have hundreds of billions of dollars that are actually going to be printed and borrowed, going to target government-favored industries, that's not a free market. That is a centrally planned economy being sold to us as an infrastructure package. You know, I thought we won the Cold War many years ago, but now we seem to be actually embracing this idea of Washington, D.C. determining the manner in which our economy should grow. That's not freedom, and it's not going to help the middle class.
That's wild. And Psaki there admitted that it's being sold as. Like, she just laid out the marketing campaign, and it's working. For whatever reason, infrastructure polls well and focus groups well. And if you just call it infrastructure, then people don't ask any questions like you have. My concern is obviously it's going to pass. Now, they're going to be really sneaky about it. What do you know about the parliamentarian procedures that they're going to use to actually pass this thing?
Yeah, most people aren't familiar with this. It's pretty arcane, but it's very important. To get most legislation through Congress, particularly on matters like this, you have to have a supermajority in order to avoid a filibuster. That's 60 votes out of 100 in the Senate. However, there's a bit of a loophole here. If you pass a piece of legislation and you need to come back and reconcile it or just revise it, you can actually do that with a bare majority. Now, the parliamentarian of the Senate decides what qualifies as a piece of new legislation or a piece of legislation that's going to be reconciliation. And she has already determined that that this can actually be passed by reconciliation, meaning that the Senate might pass the less controversial components of this infrastructure package. For instance, the parts that actually deal with infrastructure. And then the leftists that are in the Senate could go ahead and ram through the controversial pieces and not have to have that 60-vote supermajority. They can now do it with a bare majority. And to think that we might have the biggest expansion of federal government power in our lifetimes, your lifetime and my lifetime, certainly, to think that they can do this with a bare majority under the guise of infrastructure is frightening and is astounding.
Yeah, that's remarkable. In California, I have to refresh myself on what this is, but they call it gut and amend. So I think they pass a bill and then come in after and like totally get rid of it, all of it, and put it in a completely different bill. And I think they do that in order to skip like all the steps that lead up to it. So that's a pretty common practice here in California. And this seems equally shady. What do the Joe Manchins of the Senate say about this?
Well, you know, a lot of times we see senators that say one thing, but when it comes down to actually getting things done, they do another. And what's very troublesome with this is there's going to be so many provisions that can be used to direct aid to a few cronyist business interests or possibly to the benefit of particular congressional districts. And that might buy off some support from some senators that might otherwise be opposed. This is definitely a possibility.
Brutal. What's the timeline? When are they going to do this?
This could be done in the next few weeks.
What about, we just talked about George Soros in the last section about his the investments he makes on DA's races. So I just came across this article here that George Soros' lobbying arm or whatever is putting $20 million towards this. This group's called the Open Society Foundation. Why? And I don't know how much you know about George Soros' involvement in particular, but why are lobbyist groups pushing for this? Because they will probably win out.
Well, a big piece of this is a transformation of the energy sector. We heard a lot about the Green New Deal during the presidential campaign, and a lot of that proves to be very unpopular with the American people because as they realize that that'll cause their electricity prices to increase to double or triple, making the rest of the country look like California, people don't want that. But what this does is actually, under the guise of infrastructure, divert hundreds of billions of dollars to climate change technologies or to the electric vehicle industry. And they're not calling it the Green New Deal because that's very unpopular, but they're calling it infrastructure. And there are a lot of companies, a lot of crony capitalist companies that will stand to benefit from this immensely. I mean, look at what we just saw happen in Texas with the blackouts there. That was a very big problem for regular people and for businesses. But over the years, there's been a lot of green energy companies that made a lot of money from renewable energy mandates. Well, here we are with this new federal legislation. A lot of companies will stand to make a lot of money from this. So it's no surprise that they're pushing for it.
Yeah, up to $3 trillion we're looking at. Oh, good night. All right, Joel Griffith, you're the man. Heritage Foundation. Appreciate you, brother.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk frequently, man. Really appreciate your insight always. Brutal, brutal, brutal. Hey, check out the app, the smartphone app we have. It's called The First. Just look for that in the App Store. Please go back to our segment yesterday where we talked about the Georgia election bill and how it doesn't even require a voter ID. You need to know that full story and spread that. And then today, how the media deceives us with jump cut edits on TV interviews and how they tried to do that against Ron DeSantis. Their public enemy number one that they're trying to take down. That's all on our First app. Spread the word.